Hi there, I'm Scott Brown, a developer for the game Journey for the Crown, and this is my 8th devlog. In this devlog, I'm focusing on getting the demo out for the weekend. Now, as I was looking at the build, the size of this game was a little bit too large, I think, for the demo, so I skimmed through all these large files in the system, and I realized that I had this microsplat asset here, had some files that were extremely large, and I noticed that when I was packing them, the settings here were set to 1024. So I reduced them down to 256 and then recompiled every scene. And I noticed that the size went down substantially. So as I inspect here, you'll see that I reduced it from 81 megabytes, and there's two of them. You know, there's the normals and then there's your albedo. So there's two of them there. That's 160 megabytes. And then now they're reduced down to 5 and change each. So as I did that throughout my entire game, I noticed that I shaved off about 2 gigs on the demo build, so pretty happy about that change. So as I continue skimming through this game here, trying to find everything that's really large in size and focusing on that point, I noticed that the audio was a problem. I had some WAV files in here that needed to be compressed into smaller formats. I typically like to use MP3, or my most preferred is .ogg or OGG files. Those are really small, and I think the data loss in quality is a little less than MP3, but I'm no expert on that. Anyways, I started converting some of these files over and, just taking a few things off of the build size in the end. I don't believe there's any compression on music. There might be some, but it was a noticeable change as well as I started going through here and deleting all the WAV files and replacing them with the proper ones. Now this did require that I resync things, but oh well, it was easy. Now this entire process is kind of stressful. You're just sitting there constantly building over and over and over and over, trying to see all the differences you have in the game, and each time I build the game it's about 20 minutes. It's a bit of a drag, but it's required. So things are really motoring along here. I was getting really good at building the game and checking all the differences and ironing through all the problems. And then I started adding more features. I really wanted to work with voiceover. And here's just a sample of me doing some silly voices. My name's Aldous, but no time for introductions. Give me a hand here. I ended up doing a few voiceovers myself at the beginning of the demo. And I'd just like to see what you guys think so far. Some of it's pretty cringy, and some of it might be able to stay around. I think any voices that I can do myself will ultimately save me a bit of money down the road. So that's my aim here with this. So a few more polishing things that I wanted to do along in this build was the loading screen was using some old stuff. I had an old picture in there, and the bar itself, it looked a little pixelated, and I wasn't too sure at first why it was doing that, but I think it was the image itself. So I made a new one that was a little bit more crisp, and I applied it in here. I also wanted to make it look a little bit better too. I think this thinner look is a more appealing looking slider now. Things change so much over years. Art gets more difficult, I think, and more advanced looking. And I just wanted something nice and crisp looking. So I made this kind of thin little bar, and I think it looks really cool. As you can see here, it does look really clean compared to the old one. So I'm really happy with the look here. It's nice and thin. Now the next thing I noticed was these descriptions. Some of them had numbers in front of it, so I just wanted to clean that up. I had these numbers placed in there just so I knew where it was coming from, because I have this index in XML format here, and that information is being populated just as XML is kind of like a text file, but a little bit more advanced, and you can extract the code based on these blue little blocks here, which are called nodes. So once I populate the information in there, I start writing a bunch of them in there and putting in some valid information instead of placeholder stuff, because I really wanted to clean the demo up so it didn't have placeholder information all over the place. Now I came up with this idea where I would crop an image of a scene inside Editor View and just try and get the best looking picture I can possibly come up with, because I'm going to use those in the loading screens too. If you didn't notice, there's an image in the loading screen, and that image is actually being loaded based on the screen that's being loaded. So it's looking at the index. And what I basically do is I'm just gathering a bunch of these images, and I'll save them as the index that the scene will load them from. And then I'll just assign that into the loading screen, and it'll populate from the list and put it inside that little tiny image area. So I came up with this idea. Instead of having to draw all these pictures one by one, I decided, why not just take a really good screenshot and save myself some time here, because you know what, putting a picture up, a really good picture, like not the one that you're seeing below there, that's a terrible one, can take a better part of a day, especially if something this big. So I decided this was a good course for now. It looks good enough. Maybe at some point I'll touch them up, make them better. I don't know, but I'm trying to save a bit of time here. So now that I generated a bunch of images for each page, I just have to add them to the actual loading list script here. So I have this list here, and you can see it on the right hand side, and there's a whole bunch of numbers in there. There's some missing, like 1, 2, and 3, because those are actually like scenes that the loading page will never appear on. But once I got that all in there, it loads up just perfectly. And as you can see here, there's the image of the green valley that we're loading up right here. And it's even got all the proper information now. You don't see any numbers, and it's no longer placeholder information. I'm just going to see how some of the other scenes load up, see if it works properly. I'm just going to load up my developer portal thing here, and you can see I even added a little bit of a filter effect to this farmland one here, which is called the Mellow Range. So I think it looks pretty cool. It looks artistic, and I didn't really have to spend a whole lot of time doing it. It's just a screenshot. Now that I was really deep in some of all these areas in the game, I noticed that I had a mistake. I had an area where you couldn't click on these quests here, because I had my friend test the game out, and he was playing as a stealther. And obviously when you're stealthed, you're not going to be able to access some of these simple little quests here in the demo page. So as I started enabling them, I realized that some of them are actually broken. So I went in here and just tested out this rock and wanted to make sure that it was operating properly when you walk up to it as a stealth. So in this event here, I turned the stealth off, and I want to see what the functionality and see if it actually works first. So I'm going to go in here and just turn the Boolean off, so that when I do click on it and I'm stealthed, it won't appear. So I'm going to go over here and just click on that asterisk there, and it did open up the tutorial pop-up, but it didn't actually open up the adventure dialog. So I'm going to check this thing off and say that I can open it while stealthed, and boom, there we go. So everything works there. You know, those are the little tiny things that you forget while you're developing all these little quest lines and stuff like that. There's so many different ways of playing the game. Now, in some areas, I want the stealth to not trigger these adventures or quests. So in this area here, I didn't want this companion and these two dead walkers to see you while you're stealth. It's a really neat example, but I needed to set up a system where if you were to accidentally unstealth within that area, it should pop up. So I developed some new scripts in there that kind of check, and that fixed that problem. Now the other issue I had was combat. Some quests and adventures you can't actually click on when you're in combat. So some are allowed to do that, and especially this one over here. I wanted you to be able to activate it if you're in combat. Otherwise it would look really weird if you're just sitting there slaying a deadwalker right beside two of them that can't do anything. So what I opted to do was I actually freeze the currently in combat enemies that are attacking you so that the dialogue can actually continue. So I think that was an interesting way of handling that, and I've seen it done many, many times before in other games. Now how I did that was I used a coroutine. I really love using coroutines. I find that they're kind of like a slower version of an update loop if you do it this way. I end up using a while loop, and it kind of gets itself stuck in a while loop, and then it'll run basically forever. And you can actually set up little tiny intervals in your game. Whereas traditionally, I think a lot of people would probably throw this in the update loop. And when you think about how the update loop runs, it's literally the most exhaustive loop in the game that you could be coding into. So you would only want to use that for things like animations and moving objects and that sort of stuff. So I end up throwing in a 1 second delay, coroutine that basically just checks to see if this character is talking, and if he isn't, then don't do anything. Now the next thing was a real nasty bug. My friend ended up loading up the game and playing through this part here where you acquire your first companion, and when he played the game, his companion fell through the ground. So I investigated the code that I had written, and everything looked pretty good, except for one thing. I believed I was instantiating the model here, which you can see at the bottom of his legs, and he was being instantiated at the zeroed out coordinates of the scene, and then he was being quickly teleported over to where he was supposed to be. So I think the reason why it happened was I wasn't actually setting the spawn location. And you can see here I put in a little bit of a code here that I can set with a boolean a spawn location. And if that's set to true, then that temporary value, which is a local value called spawn location, gets the values from a static vector3 location in Game Master. So once I set that information properly, my characters weren't falling through the floor anymore. But it took me a long time to figure out why, because I kept focusing on all the wrong areas. And that's, that kind of stuff is deadly. It can happen to any developer and any coder. It's nice when you do conquer them, though. I'm pretty happy that I ended up finding it out, and it didn't take me more than a few hours. I also added some user interface options like skipping the monologue, and also adding in some prompts when you haven't finished entering in the proper stuff you need in order to create a character properly. For instance, I forgot my name here, so I put a little red dialogue pop up that shows, and there should be some more here as well. So when you try to create it, it sends you over to the 4th page, which just notifies you that you have some points to spend here and they want a background of your character. I also added audio controls at the front menu. I had already placed it in-game, but I wanted to give people access to turn the music off at the intro here, so I went ahead and added that. Now, I was also recommended to put a call to action, so I went ahead and put a wish list link inside the game intro page, along with a bug reporting page too. Now, I'm releasing the demo this weekend. I hope that everyone's going to stop by my Twitch channel and have a peek and see all the other people commenting and letting me know how things are. I really hope that you guys can send in some bug reports if you do spot any. It would be great if there just wasn't any, but realistically, there's probably going to be plenty. But if you haven't already, please head on over to my Steam page, play the demo, and make sure that you wishlist the game. I've got a tremendous amount of wish lists. I'm nearing a real big milestone there, and I'd love to see even more of that stuff. I think the demo's really going to open the door for a lot of popularity in this game, and I'm really looking forward to it. Anyways, I hope to catch you on the weekends. I do stream every Saturday. This Saturday is going to be a really special one for me, and I think there's going to be a decent turnout, so I hope to catch you there. Otherwise, I hope that you subscribe on YouTube here and possibly check me out on Twitch. Take her easy. Thanks.